Are legendary Pokemon still legendary? Legendary Pokemon have been at the center of fan discourse for the better part of the past few generations, especially when the first proper trailers for Scarlet and Violet were released. What were once creatures of myth that you had to find buried deep inside of long dungeons you can now use as your own personal bicycles. Yes, these are truly the types of debates that only nerds who don't touch grass on a daily basis could possibly have. And now I want to throw my hat into the ring. Let's break down what makes a legendary Pokemon legendary and how the presentation of these creatures has changed over time. Like most things in life that come first, Gen 1 sets the standard for what a legendary Pokemon should be. There's a ton to not like about Gen 1. The jank battle gameplay, the slow-paced nature of the games, the elitist fanbase who says that Pokemon used to be so much better than it is now. Oh wait, that might be what I'm doing right now. But I think above all other things that Gen 1 introduced, the way legendary Pokemon are handled is among the best. The birds and Mewtwo, we're not including Mew because he's a little special, are superb examples of how legendary Pokemon should be handled. The games don't even have to tell you that these Pokemon are special, you just know they are based on the fact that these are the only static encounters in the entire game. Articuno is tucked away deep inside of a long, icy dungeon far away from the reaches of humanity where the player has to solve numerous puzzles just to get to the bottom. Zapdos lives inside of an abandoned power plant on the side of one of the least significant routes in the game, an area that the player has to actively backtrack to. Moltres is inside of Victory Road. That one has always been a little strange to me. But they move him to Mount Ember in the remakes and he feels much more at home there. And Mewtwo is obviously the end-all be-all, the strongest Pokemon in the world at the time, living deep inside of a treacherous cave filled with terrifyingly strong Pokemon that you literally can't get access to until you become the strongest trainer. The Cinnabar Mansion is also just a fantastic bit of foreshadowing towards this encounter, with the journals giving you the backstories of Mew and Mewtwo, but never giving away when this encounter would happen. It's a very passive way to do world building and exposition, but I much prefer this to random NPCs just vomiting lore in your face like some of the other Pokemon games do. Legendary Pokemon feel like proper rewards in Gen 1. They reward your curiosity and urge to explore optional areas. Again, aside from Victory Road, why'd they do that? Gen 2 is where we see a remarkable shift in how legendary Pokemon are handled though. No longer are these optional bosses to seek out, now they have graduated to full-on game mascots. You know what these guys look like from the moment you saw the first commercial for these games, because it's 1999, and you probably didn't have access to the internet for all the news and trailers. I don't know why I'm saying that though, I was literally a baby. Gen 2 takes a much more lore-heavy approach, which is appropriate for the region of Japan that Johto takes inspiration from. Kyoto and the surrounding areas are a much more traditional area of Japan where tales of the past are still kept alive. Unlike Tokyo and Kanto, where modernization has pushed a lot of these tales to the side. It makes sense why the Johto region would have a much larger emphasis on Pokemon world lore. With that being said, legendaries kinda suck here because 3 out of 5 of them are roaming encounters, and that's only fun to psychopaths. But I get what they were going for. They wanted to make it feel like these legendaries were truly involved in this region, that they're things that the average person living in Johto could just run into if they're lucky enough. Eugene is an example of one such character who, after a brief encounter with Suicune, makes it his life's goal to meet the beast once again. He kinda embodies the same feeling the player gets when you first randomly run into a beast only for it to flee on the first turn. That feeling of, gosh darn it, I'm gonna get you next time, you majestic piece of poop. For the most part, Gens 3 through 5 would adopt and expand on the same form of storytelling for legendary Pokemon. Your box legendaries all have required story events where you have to catch or at least fight them. There are some legendaries that roam, just like the beasts do, and there are some that are completely optional at the end of long dungeons, like the Gen 1 legendaries. I said this in my video where I ranked all the regions on how they handled legendary Pokemon a few years ago, but I wholeheartedly believe that Hoenn strikes the best balance of these regions. Groudon and Kyogre have this fascinating lore that really envelops the entire game. You can see how the region of Hoenn itself was literally shaped by these two forces and their battle millions of years ago, with it being a near-perfect split between land and sea, perfect unless you work for IGN at least. One thing I really enjoyed about Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire is how early the game introduces you to the Groudon vs Kyogre lore in Granite Cave. So 15 hours later, when they actually get awakened, you can do the Leonardo DiCaprio pointing meme and say, hey, it's those guys from the cave painting. The Reggies are by far my favorite trio, at least when it comes to how you encounter them. In battle, they kinda suck, but everything leading up to them is fantastic. The game manuals for Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald all came with instructions to translate Braille so you could feasibly figure out the puzzles in each of their caves. Now that is freaking cool! On top of that, very discreet clues about their existence are dropped throughout the game if you're paying attention. There's always a ruin maniac or two around their chambers talking about the existence of the ruins. There are few NPCs around the region who mention old stories about titans of ice, rock, and steel who were all locked away many years ago. One such NPC lives in Pacific Town, a completely optional location that really just serves as a place for you to fly back to when you inevitably mess up the ocean current puzzle that fittingly leads to the sealed chamber where you unlock all the Reggies. Again, passive storytelling just like with Mewtwo in the mansion. Absolutely none of this is required. Only dedicated players who look into every detail and talk to every NPC are going to find out about the Reggies. And that's good. There is some content that should be harder for people to access. I'm not talking Mirage Island levels of hard where 99.9% of the fanbase just can't ever get there, but a lengthy enough process that rewards truly dedicated players of the game. Gens 4 and 5 don't really have anything as in-depth or interesting as the Reggies, but to their credit, they at least remember to include things like Heatran and the Swords of Justice that you still have to go out of your way to get. But there was a problem with legendaries that started in this time frame. There's just too many new ones. I get that Sinnoh is where the Pokemon world started and you would expect that region to have a lot of legendary Pokemon, but between it and Unifa, you have 18 legendary Pokemon. That is a lot for a group that is meant to be rare and exclusive.
Damn it. 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 Damn it.
In Gen 6, I believe they tried to address this issue by only introducing 3 new legendaries, that being the trio of Xerneas, Yveltal, and Zygarde. Again, I'm not including mythicals here. Although part of that might just be that Kalos in general didn't introduce many Pokemon, so naturally there would be less legendaries. But I think that Kalos goes a little too far in the opposite direction. There's literally only one optional encounter with a new legendary, and that's Zygarde. The other 2 are Mewtwo and one of the legendary birds depending on which starter you picked, which really doesn't excite me nearly as much as new legendaries do. Sun and Moon, on the other hand, went in the complete opposite direction, giving us a record-breaking 11 new legendary Pokemon. Though that number includes guys like Type Null, Cosmog, and Cosmoem, who are the first legendaries capable of evolving. The problem with Alola's legendaries, though, is that I'm pretty sure the only one in the entire region that you have to actively seek out is Tapu Bulu. Every other legendary, or at least the location you find them in, is introduced to you through the story. I guess you find Necrozma randomly in the grass in 10 Carat Hill and Sun and Moon, but that's just lame, come on now. Sword and Shield pretty much follows the same trend. Almost every new legendary introduced here is given to you through the story. You can't even fail catching Eternatus, Zacian, Zamazenta, Spectrier, Glacier, or Calyrex, and Kubfu is just given to you. Even though I personally think Kubfu and Urshifu should have been this region's Riolu and Lucario. Just special little dudes that you get that are unique, but not legendary. In typical Reggie fashions, the only ones in this entire game that you have to go out of your way to get are Regidrago and Regieleki, so at least that trend was kept alive. But yeah, one of the biggest problems in Gen 7 and 8 is almost every legendary Pokemon is required to be encountered by the story. Having story material for legendary Pokemon is a bit of a double-edged sword. On one hand, we like getting lore and having these big climactic moments where everybody gets to see the legendary in its full glory as part of the story. Like the legendary dragon awakening at End's castle, Miraidon and Koraidon gaining their full power to fight back against the AI professor. These are extremely cool scripted moments. But on the other hand, it kinda robs us of that classic feeling of discovery. Of, oh, I'm just goofing around in a cave and I found a legendary and now I'm freaking out. Or if you're a mythical Pokemon nowadays, except for Pecharunt, you get neither. But that's a different rant entirely. And now we get to the games with the biggest debate behind them, Scarlet and Violet. Like I said at the beginning of this video, when it was revealed that you get Koraidon and Miraidon at the beginning of the game and not the end, the internet lost its mind. They mourned the death of legendaries like they mourned the death of a family member. And the games weren't even out yet! I might be in the minority for this, but like, I don't really mind it. I mean, come on, these legendary Pokemon in the box haven't been a secret since Gen 2. And I actually like that you grow alongside the legendaries in these games. It's something new that we haven't seen before. Props to them for breaking the status quo. They also complement the idea of Scarlet and Violet being open world games. They pretty much combine all the functions of Legends Arceus' Ride Pokemon all into one super-powered being, who can barely climb up the side of a cliff for most of the game. Point is, there's a lot of stuff in Scarlet and Violet to complain about, but Koraidon and Miraidon aren't one. And neither are the Treasures of Ruin for that matter, or the Calamity Pokemon they might be called now. It seems like the Nintendo Music app is already renaming them. I'll be honest, I think this is the best handled legendary group since the original Regis. The stakes that you find scattered across the region are one of the only cool things that you'll find in Paldea's open world. Every time you pull one out, your curiosity grows. You're like, I think this is related to a legendary, but I'm not really sure. And if you go out of your way to take the history classes in the academy, then you learn all about the treasures and the fall of the Paldean Empire, and while the professor can mark the locations of their chambers on the map, you still have to find the stakes on your own. Unfortunately, Paldea's DLC did not really help out. Terrapagos and all the other legendaries introduced were handled about as well as Sword and Shield's handled theirs, with the terrible moldy cherry on top being the snack legendaries that show up across the region in the Indigo Disc. These guys all just stand in a field, doing nothing. There's no dungeons, no puzzles, which I guess that's just Paldea's fault in general for not having any dungeons. They're just there. And really, this is indicative of the larger problem that I think Pokemon has been facing for a while now. Starting in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, and pretty much every generation since, Game Freak has had this idea of putting almost every single past legendary in one game. Or at least as many as they can. And most of the time, they're not included in very interesting ways. Like, yeah, Black 2 and White 2 had a ton of post-game legendaries too, but at least most of them got their own areas and side quests to follow. Hoopa's Rings and Oras were okay, but then you get Ultra Space Dimensions and Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, and Dynamax Adventures were at least fun, I'll give them that. But then you have Romanus Park and BDSP. They literally did it twice in one generation. And now the snack legendaries in Scarlet and Violet. I think the problem is, legendaries are just too abundant now. If every single game includes 30 to 40 legendary Pokemon to catch, then catching them doesn't feel cool, it just feels like a chore. I mean, I'm one of those Pokemon completionist people that does every possible thing in every game, but even starting in Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, I've just ignored the large majority of these legendary Pokemon. Because they're not even valuable. Did you know that in Gen 8 you can catch Dialga, Palkia, and Giratina in all 3 different games? What am I gonna do with 3 Giratinas? You used to hang on to these legendaries and transfer them up from one game to the next because you didn't know when they'd become available again. If you bought Pokemon Platinum, that was your one Giratina for the next 5 years. And now you've been able to capture 5 of them since Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire came out. I know people don't like scarcity, but scarcity creates value. And this is what Game Freak is struggling with on every front. We get too many legendary Pokemon every generation. We get too many returning ones. We gotta slow our roll a little bit. And I know there's a good reason why they do this. I think a large part of it is that they've allowed the usage of restricted legendary Pokemon in most VGC formats for the better part of the last decade, and they just want players to have easier access to those Pokemon. Like, hey, it's probably a good thing that you can catch Kubfu in Scarlet and Violet and not have to pay $60 for Sword and Shield, plus another $30 for the DLC, just to get the most optimal Pokemon in the game. I mean, you're still spending $90 on Scarlet and Violet plus DLC regardless, but at least you don't have to double it to get the strongest Pokemon in the format. I'm of the opinion that the meta is just better when Urshifu and Calyrex are banned, but that's just me. Another factor is probably just the DLC model in general. They know they can keep people happier with their $30 purchase for longer if they just copy and paste a bunch of legendaries into every game. But ultimately, that is why I'm not going to totally condemn them for how legendary Pokemon are treated nowadays. Like I said before, I think Scarlet and Violet's base game, for the most part, treated its legendaries fairly well. The DLC definitely fumbled that bag a bit, but at least I understand why they did what they did. Of course, there's always the possibility that I'm just old and jaded now. I'm 26, you may as well put me in my forever box and put me 6 feet underground. If I were a kid, I probably wouldn't question any of this nonsense. But I'm a Pokemon YouTuber, and it's my job to be overly serious about these kinds of things. Unfortunately. But at any rate, what do you think about modern day legendary Pokemon? Let me know in the comments section down below. But don't forget to leave a like on this video if you enjoyed, subscribe for more videos just like this one, and I'll see you guys next time.